Some of the key takeaways is that Xi Jinping is now, well, possibly could be ruling for life, and that his status has been elevated to the likes of Mao and Deng. Does he deserve this place in history, you think?
Well, that's one for the history books to write, but certainly Xi Jinping sees himself on par with those two leaders, which I think tells us that he sees himself as a fundamentally transformational leader for China. And in some ways, that's hard to argue with when you look at where China was 10 years and where it is today. He has had an extraordinary impact. I think that the big question for us, though, is, and you just mentioned this, we haven't had a leader for life in China since Mao. And obviously, that came with some downsides as well as up.
You've got to wonder how he'll be navigating it. I mean, he's holding on to power at a time that's pretty uncertain for China. We have, people that's pretty much disillusioned, the young finding it difficult to find jobs, fertility rate at about 1.3%. How do you see him navigating, and will common prosperity save the day?
Well, in some sense, I think one of the reasons Xi Jinping is saying that he needs to stay on, that we need a steady hand on the tiller, is precisely because China is looking out at a pretty significant set of headwinds. You mentioned demographics, total factor productivity slump. You have some social issues around sort of general malaise. And of course, you have an increasingly volatile and uncertain external environment for Chinese firms. So that is precisely one of the things Xi Jinping is saying is, I alone am the one who's going to be able to tackle these. On common prosperity, just quickly, in and of itself, no. Common prosperity is about sort of shaving off the edges of some of the real sort of manifest signs of inequality. But if we think about common prosperity as really the opening salvo in a new phase of Chinese policymaking that's going to be designed to address social maladies, issues around the real estate sector, closing the regulatory space around some consumer-facing technology companies, addressing some of the issues that are affecting the cost of living, then I think this could, over the stretch of the next decade, make some significant headway.
So, Jude, you're not suggesting that this is an ideological reset in any way?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I think it's hard to read the plenum communique this morning, or just the verbiage surrounding the sixth plenum and then leading up to the 20th Party Congress, and not see that they're clearly saying, look, the growth model that was working throughout the reform and opening period has run out of gas, and we're telling you right now that we're entering a new phase of China's development, and along with that, a new set of ideological constructs. If the subtext to your question is Xi Jinping going full-blown communism? No, I don't think it's that severe, but I also don't think we should minimize the ideological knock-on effects of even just shifting the focus of the growth model from aggregate quantity of growth to a more qualitative approach to growth.
Well, with that in mind, we have already talked a little bit about common prosperity. With that is also this notion of dual circulation. Now, if we marry that with, let's say, this tepid involvement with G20 and COP26, and then also the reasons of COVID, of course, used officially, that Xi Jinping has not left China for nearly 2 years, the question is China turning inward?
Yeah. A really important question, and I think the answer is in part. So obviously some of the decisions around the insularity here are about, as you said, COVID, also the political calendar for Xi Jinping, whether it's the sixth plenum, which we can now see why that was so important to him, the Olympics in February, the National People's Congress next March, and then the big one, the 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping has a lot on his domestic plate. So I think clearly we're going to see a structural inward turn over the next 12 months. I think there's going to be a bit of a reset when he gets through the 20th Party Congress. He's going to emerge confident. I think he's going to have a new renewed mandate and mission. So I think you'll see him get out into the world. But I take your question and agree. I think there has been a shift in terms of the Communist Party's thinking about what the external environment means. And what dual circulation is saying is, look, we want to be internationally integrated, but on our own terms, and avoiding some of the pitfalls of supply chain choke points, navigating some of the sanctions regimes. So in the aggregate, yes, I think China is going to be a more marginally inward-looking country than it was a decade ago.
Right. Jude, there's a headline here from the party official at the briefing currently happening, and he says that Xi is at the core of the call of times, the choice of history. Now, you talk about how China is increasingly looking inwards. What does it necessarily mean for its vision to be a global player then? Will its credibility be dented, and how will it work from here?
I think some of the verbiage around this kind of emerging cult of Xi Jinping is worrying, but I think Xi Jinping's core focus in many ways, in addition to some of the domestic challenges we mentioned, is pushing China out to be a truly global power of kind of aggregate, what they call comprehensive national power by 2035, which is one of his key goals. So ultimately, China, as long as its economy is humming along and has, as Xi Jinping says, a sort of a magnetic or gravitational pull, it's going to have significant international power. And so I think for Xi Jinping, the story is consolidate power here through the 20th Party Congress, really get a mandate for the next 5 to 10 years, and then push out with my global agenda.
Jude, very, very quickly, final question here. We've got a leader who has coalesced power, language and verbiage, as you put it, like Xi at the call of in the call of times and a choice of history from a party official, suggests that he has coalesced so much power. The thing is, you can also coalesce your enemies when you do that. Is the sword of Damocles over his head? Very, very quickly.
No, there's no functional challenge to Xi Jinping, and I think we need to accept that he's large and in charge for the foreseeable future.